It's now my pleasure to welcome Jan Schakowsky of the 9th District of Illinois. Congresswoman Jan was elected to represent Illinois' 9th Congressional District in 1998 after serving for 8 years in the Illinois General Assembly. She is in her 7th term, serving in the House Democratic leadership as a Chief Deputy Whip and as a member of the Steering and Policy Committee. She's a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee and the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, where she is a ranking Democrat on the Oversight Subcommittee. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome Jan Schakowsky.
I particularly like that you said Congresswoman Jan. Most people call me Jan, and I appreciate that sign of friendship. And I am very proud to be the Congresswoman of this district in which AIC sits, and to once again be here with you. I'm happy to welcome those who are from out of town to our great city, particularly the Secretary General and his wife. It's an honor to be here and speak with you in the audience and all of you as well. Chicago is a city that prides itself on its diversity, and a key part of that is the vibrant and dynamic Muslim community. Through events like this, as well as their regular program of courses, the American Islamic College has provided valuable space for discussion and debate, as well as a resource for anyone in the community looking to learn more about the Islamic religion and culture. And it's not an easy time to be Muslims in America. I hear from too many of my Muslim constituents that they feel uncomfortable and targeted in their own mosques, that they face discrimination at work, that though they are Americans, they are viewed by some with suspicion and distrust. And of course, the reality is that the Muslim community has played a critical role throughout history. In his speech in Cairo in the summer of 2009, President Obama stated, quote, "American Muslims have enriched the United States. They have fought in our wars. They have served in our government. They have stood for civil rights. They have started businesses. They have taught in our universities. They've excelled in our sports arenas. They've won Nobel Prizes, built our tallest building, and lit the Olympic torch," unquote. American Muslims are a crucial part of our community here in Chicago, and as I said, as a representative of the 9th Congressional District, it's my pleasure to live and work in one of the most racially, ethnically, and religiously diverse communities in the country. One of the most exciting things about my district is the fact that so many people come here from different backgrounds and different perspectives and outlooks on the world. And this diversity brings an immense richness to the greater Chicago community. But again, despite this, too many Muslim Americans continue to face persecution, discrimination, even violence. Last year, we witnessed a disturbing backlash surrounding the proposed construction of an Islamic center in Lower Manhattan. I just raised at an open hearing of the intelligence community the concern that I have of the relationship now with the FBI and the police in New York and some of the surveillance that is going on, and ask the Admiral Mullen, who is Clapper, sorry, who is the DNI, he's head of the intelligence community, to please look into this, because I feel that this is a kind of discrimination, and this kind of surveillance is not what we're about in the United States of America. So we need to stand together, regardless of religious affiliation, and say that these sorts of attacks are absolutely unacceptable to us as Americans. Here in our own community, in the days immediately following 9/11, I called for, it was the weekend after the 9/11 incident, I organized a solidarity walk. No speeches, but just that people should stand together and walk down Devon Avenue. About 1,000 people showed up, lots of American flags, and people of all different faiths, Muslims and Christians and Jews and Hindus and Sikhs, and we just stood shoulder to shoulder to say that we would not allow that moment of national tragedy to become a time when we turned against one another. And too often in politics, the term American values is actually used to oppose immigration and inclusion and diversity. And to me, this couldn't be farther from the truth of American values. Religious tolerance and acceptance are fundamental American values. And what's more, they are enshrined in our Constitution, that all Americans have the right to worship as they please, where they please. And on a global level, it's never easy to discuss U.S. relations with the Muslim world. In part, that's because it's an inherently complicated and multidimensional topic. It would be a mistake to view Muslims as a monolithic entity with a single worldview and a totally unified agenda. However, it's undeniable that over the last couple of decades, we have witnessed an erosion of trust between America and many in the Muslim world, as well as a rise in violence and antagonism. Again, the speech in Cairo, Barack Obama went to tell the world that the United States would seek, quote, a new beginning between the United States and Muslims, unquote, one based on what he called mutual interest and mutual respect. We have a president today who believes in the power of communication, the importance of dialogue, and the value of diplomacy, a president who has clearly stated that, quote, America and Islam are not exclusive and need not be in competition, unquote. We need to work together to fight extremism and violence, to oppose those who corrupt religious teachings and use them to justify hatred and atrocities. We need to make it clear that attacks against civilians and campaigns of terror are never acceptable. And we in the United States need to recognize where our own policies have increased antagonism and worsened relationships. We have to reduce the say as we do, do as we say and say as we do gap that exists right now in the United States. And to this end, I have strongly and consistently opposed policies of torture and indefinite detention. Both were institutionalized under the previous administration. The so-called enhanced interrogation techniques and Guantanamo Bay and Bagram Prison are at best ineffective and at worst incredibly damaging to our national security, and are, at least those techniques are now outlawed. And that is not to say, yes, they are now outlawed by this administration. They are now outlawed. I had the head of the CIA, former General Petraeus, reiterate that at that open hearing, that he opposes those techniques, they are now outlawed, and that he believes in following the law. That's not to say that there are not real points of disagreement. I would suspect that one place that I personally, as a Jew, as well as the U.S. government, may disagree with many people here is on the topic of Israel. But that should not mean that we shy away from discussing these points of divergence. We must be able to disagree in a respectful manner, to address points of tension, and hopefully play a constructive role in actually helping to resolve those tensions and the problems that we now face in the Middle East. I also think we need to have greater constructive discussion about fundamental human rights. This year, we've seen an unprecedented wave of revolution across much of the Arab world, people taking to the streets to demand an end to unrepresentative and often abusive regimes. And though the future in many of these countries is still unclear, for the first time, many people in the region have a real hope for a democratic government. And the United States of America must be a leader in the defense of human rights. As a nation, we stand for a defined set of universal human rights, including freedom of speech and freedom of peaceful assembly and freedom of and equality and rule of law and democratic governance. As violations of human rights remain endemic in too many parts of the world now more than ever, We need to ensure that human rights are a foreign policy priority. And again, we have to be consistent in the application of our beliefs. I have been particularly involved in promoting the participation of women in political and civil society. And I see by the video and the presence here and the curriculum at AIC that you are too, and that's also true of OIC. We were having some conversations about the greater involvement of women. I strongly believe that women bring a unique and important perspective to public discourse, and engagement of women becomes all the more important in post-conflict societies. I can share with you one illustrative story. Last year, as co-chair of the Congressional Caucus on Women's Issues, I hosted a roundtable between female members of the U.S. Congress and the Iraqi Parliament. This event was attended by some of the most liberal members of the House of Representatives, that would include me, but also some of the most conservative. We strongly disagree on a large variety of issues, and it might sound obvious, but it quickly became apparent that just as there were different views within the U.S. delegation, the women Iraqi parliamentarians also had widely divergent positions. They disagreed on American involvement in their country, on the position of women in society, and on the role of religion in the state. But they also agreed on some key points as well. They were all concerned about their country's ongoing cycles of violence and the impact of that on women and families. And they all believed in the importance of providing assistance and support to widows whose husbands have been killed. And while they may have entered politics for a variety of different reasons, and although they may have held different views of the status of women in society, they all clearly felt that women do have a role to play in the political process. I know we don't all see women's political participation and women's rights in the same light. It's not just a debate between the West and the Islamic world. Even in this country, we continue to face a raging debate, for example, on women's reproductive rights. But I strongly believe that there are some rights that are so fundamental that we need to work together to fight abuses wherever in the world they occur. All girls have the right to go to school. All women have the right to necessary medical care. And most of all women have the right to live free from fear of violence and abuse. Far too many women in the United States and throughout the world continue to be the targets of gender-based violence. Girls are attacked with acid just because they are trying to attend school. Young girls are forced to undergo female genital mutilation, a procedure that often leaves them with pain and health complications for the rest of their lives. Women in war zones are systematically and brutally raped as a way to intimidate and subjugate entire communities. And girls and women throughout the world continue to be assaulted by their own family members, husbands, boyfriends, and partners. Abuses against women are not specific to any one country, culture, or religion. Instead, they are an example of a pervasive problem that we need to work together to discuss and address. So I think this brings me back to where I started, the true importance of engagement and dialogue and tolerance, both here within the United States of America and all around the world. We need to work together to acknowledge that which we all share and to communicate on that which may divide us. I know that is the purpose of this gathering here today. That is the mission of AIC, that is the mission of OIC, and let me say again how much of a pleasure it is to be with you today and to welcome you all to AIC for this conference. Thank you so much.